Welcome back. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS with me, Kendall Burton. My guest tonight is Mr. Michael Flood, a member of the United Workers' Party who has served in several capacities in that organization. We were speaking earlier about politics. We want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Royal Signature Police Force. One of the main concerns from the United States government as it relates to the local police force is what happened in 2011 when there were about 12 police killings. This happened under the watch of the United Workers' Party government, and Rufus Bousquet, who was the foreign minister at the time, appeared publicly to defend the police and made a famous omelette statement saying if you want to make an omelette, a few eggs have to be broken. This is what Mr. Bousquet actually said on the 25th of June last year in an exclusive interview with the DBS News World. Let's play our first clip and then we'll come back to you and get your response.
All 12 fatal police shootings referred to in the U.S. State Department Human Rights Report occurred under the former United Workers' Party administration. But the island's foreign minister at the time says as far as he is aware, the government of the day gave no instructions to the police to use whatever means necessary to curb the violent crime wave that was inundating the country at the time. No government, Mr. Rufus Bousquet says, can give carte blanche to the police, as lawmen would act in the best interest of upholding law and order. As far as Mr. Bousquet is concerned, the police acted at a time when citizens, in his words, were screaming for action.
People talk about the blatant police action, but there seemed to have been a lot of blatant criminal action in the country as well. I mean, people were firing shots at Rodney Bay, shooting people out in the open. I mean, this sort of thing was going on. And quite frankly, I supported the police in a lot of what they did at the time. I don't know the facts in every case, so I can't support them in every case. But certainly, we saw that there was a lull, and has been to this day, a lull in the level of criminal activity as a result of the action that was taken by the police. So sometimes, you can't make omelettes without breaking eggs.
According to Mr. Bousquet, if the police found it necessary to break eggs to restore law and order and make law-abiding citizens feel safe, they, he said, have to do what they have to do.
We're a small country. We don't have the resources, the investigative resources that other larger countries have. And sometimes the police must take some swift action in order to ensure that things happen. So really, it's for the families, etc., who are affected by some of this, I could well understand how they feel. And if they have a grievance, they should do whatever it is that they have to do in order to get justice for their loved ones. But generally speaking, we have to understand that this is a country, what was going on was threatening the very economy of this country, and that cannot be allowed to happen.
Speaking about the response of the police to the violent crime wave, Mr. Bousquet says he has no hesitation in saying that generally the end justifies the means. He feels that no responsible government or law enforcement agency can allow a small group of criminal elements to destabilize the peace and security of the nation to the point where the economy and the livelihood of citizens are threatened. At the same time, Mr. Bousquet felt the need for the police to do all that is necessary to justify their actions, whereupon the Prime Minister should dispatch a strongly worded letter to the U.S. Secretary of State regarding the State Department Human Rights Report on St. Lucia. For the DBS News World, Pete Ninval reporting.
And that was, of course, the former Foreign Affairs Minister, Rufus Bousquet, speaking on 12 police shootings which occurred in 2011. What do you make of Mr. Bousquet's statements in that report?
Having listened to Mr. Bousquet's statement, I think what Mr. Bousquet was referring to was the situation at the time. The statement of if you want to make omelette, you must break a few eggs. Of course, I think he was trying to say if you want to get rid of the crime rate in St. Lucia, of course, you have to target the criminals. That does not mean the police should go about doing it in an unlawful manner, and I'm not implying that they did. I'm a very strong advocate of the police being given a fair chance to do their work. If we were to go back to that period, almost every weekend you would hear of 1 or 2 homicides. And after the police, of course, went about confronting the criminals, and I do not believe the police deliberately went out just killing criminals. I believe if the police found themselves in a situation where they confront the criminals, and of course the criminals confront them, they as the law persons would do what is necessary to protect themselves and protect the interests of the country. I'm in no position to say that the police acted illegally. Of course, the report from the US, I believe, it speaks volumes of their perception of what took place in St. Lucia. Of course, it is left for us, the judiciary here, to prove to them that there was due process in the actions the police took at the time.
But do you think we've taken the U.S. State Department's report seriously enough? Even the police commissioner has said that we ought not to take it lightly, especially as a tourism-based country.
I do not think we've taken it seriously enough, because, as a matter of fact, I have not heard any pronouncements from this government having taken over the reins of government almost immediately after that thing happened. I have not heard any pronouncement from this government, and I'm not saying that to make people believe that they are not probably thinking of it or looking at it. But of course, it's almost 2 years, and if the mighty United States is breathing down our throats, we need to do a lot more than we are doing now.
But since the killings occurred under the UWP administration or government, would you say that the government of that day should share some of the responsibility for the way the police acted and the United States reaction?
In as much as it happened under the reign of the United Workers' Party government, I do not believe for 1 minute that the Commissioner of Police or the acting Commissioner of Police then had any directive from the government to go about taking out the criminals. I believe, having known Mr. Francois for quite a number of years, I believe Mr. Francois is one who believes in fact he knows what it is when it comes to law and order in the country. And I think what Mr. Francois and his team wanted to see is to ensure that when you leave here, you could get to your home safely and you could rest until tomorrow morning safely, without having to get off your bed every half hour, every 45 minutes to see who's outside your window.
Okay. Well, those 2011 killings brought this reaction from the Prime Minister after a damning U.S. State Department human rights report, which we alluded to during our conversation on St. Lucia, and it made reference to the killings. Incidentally, Stephenson King raised questions about the validity of that report. So let's take a look at our second clip and hear what he had to say back then.
The Prime Minister says although the Human Rights Report relates to a time when his Labour Party was not in government, the reality is that it has damaged the country as a whole. According to Dr. Kenny Anthony, the reference in the report to tardiness in responding to the police slayings is a justifiable concern.
I am very, very unhappy with the way the coroner system works in St. Lucia. I recall that when we were in office the first cycle, that we had introduced new legislation, but I am not sure that there is an adequate infrastructure to deal with those problems. I mean, it's not just the concern by the U.S. State Department, but the families involved need to bring finality to these incidents.
The Prime Minister says the important thing is that the police realize that the way in which they go about their duties can have consequences for the country.
I do not wish to be misunderstood, because I think we have to pay tribute to the police force. They have done a very good job in terms of bringing crime under control. I mean, it's very heartening that the number of violent crime has decreased, but very clearly it's important too that the police operate within the four corners of the law. All of us need to feel the security in the application of the law.
As far as Dr. Anthony is concerned, the U.S. State Department report on human rights in St. Lucia might not have been as damaging if there was some finality to the police slayings by way of inquiries by a coroner. For the DBS News World, Pete Ninval reporting.
Your reaction, Mr. Flood?
My reaction to that is I believe there is a separation between the legislature and the judiciary, and I believe it is a responsibility of the judiciary to ensure that due process is done, and to ensure that, of course, the killing of the so-called criminals were not done illegally, and if, of course, any one of it was done illegally, of course that person or the persons should be brought to justice. I think this is the only way we will be able to appease the U.S. government, and of course to stop having them breathe down our throats, because I think now based on my information, even coming from the embassy in Barbados, very few St. Lucians are able to obtain U.S. visas now. So of course it goes to show that the U.S. government is definitely not pleased with something in St. Lucia.
Okay, now you spoke about the visa situation. That brings us to the situation with the police force, where a number of officers have been barred from participating in shooting activities in the United States. And there have been suggestions that all of that is part of their response or their concerns about the extrajudicial killings, alleged killings. The Prime Minister, through his press secretary, has said that he will address the public concerns about that issue in a statement this week. I'm going to ask you to gaze into your crystal ball and tell me what you think the Prime Minister is going to say in that address. What are some of the issues that you would like to hear him address in that statement?
I think first and foremost, we need to know why the police officers were not allowed to travel to the U.S. Of course, we heard from the police commissioner where he stated it had to do with some ticketing issues. But I would ask why, as police commissioner, I believe I travel to the U.S., most times 10, 12 times a year. And of course, at times I get to Euro on a run, there is an issue with my ticket, and I am able to get it rectified right there and then. I found myself in countries, outside of St. Lucia, ticketing issues, and I'm able to get it resolved. I am not questioning the police commissioner as to whether he was speaking the truth, but I think the Prime Minister need to let the public know exactly why the police officers were not allowed to attend that conference or that training program in the U.S. Also, I think the Prime Minister now, after almost 2 years, the Prime Minister now needs to let the St. Lucian public know why the visa of a seasoned police officer, I think at the time he was deputy or assistant commissioner, his visa was revoked also, and up to now we've not heard anything. Of course, we remember the famous revocation of Richard Frederick's visa, and there was so much hue and cry about Richard's visa, whilst we were in government and they were in opposition, and up to now, after almost 2 years, we have not heard anything coming from the government as to the reason or reasons why those 2 visas were revoked at the time. And I think we really need to get to that.
And you hope that he will address those issues in any statement he has to make on that.
It is my fervent hope that the Prime Minister will let the St. Lucian public know exactly what transpired during the revocation of those 2 visas and why the senior police officers were not allowed to leave the country to attend that training program by the U.S. government.
Okay. There was rather some speculation. Reports were carried online that the Commissioner of Police, Villain Francois, would be sent on long leave. The government has since come back and said there's no truth to that. There was reports that Herman Gill Francis would be brought in on contract. They've also denied that. But let's recall that the Stephenson King administration is the one that also removed the former Commissioner Osbert Regis as Commissioner of Police. So was he somehow getting in the way?
You mean who was getting in the way?
The former Commissioner.
The former Commissioner. Okay, based on, of course, utterances then, the police force, they were not they were not a cohesive force then. Of course, you would hear from certain police officers, you'd hear from individuals where the then commissioner, and I'm simply saying what the rumor was, had not or was not having meetings with his senior officers as often as they should have. There was a point where the commission, the deputy, they were not in harmony with each other, and I believe the security of the nation is so important that you need to ensure at all times that especially the top brass of your police force work in tandem with to ensure that there is law and order in the country. And I don't think I will go as far as saying that he was in the way, but I believe at the time there was some upheavals in the police force that needed paying some attention to.
Okay. I think we're due for another break, so what we'll do is take that break, and when we come back, we can go back to a little discussion on politics and the UWP.